So a while ago I made a poll and asked you guys whether you wanted my next history video to be about Orzammar or Kirkwall. And while it wasn't too big of a difference, most of you voted for Orzammar, so here you go. Orzammar is one of the Great Dwarven Thaigs and one of the two remaining Dwarven Kingdoms in Thedas. The city, with its population of over 100,000, lies deep beneath the Frostback Mountains, and it's got the Lyran trade to thank for its wealth. Orzammar was once the capital of the Dwarven Empire, and according to legend, the Thaigs' name originates from one of the 7 brothers who founded the Dwarven Empire. Curious about how it all started? Well, pour yourself a nice mug of strong Dwarven ale, and let me tell you all about the history of Orzammar. For the very beginning of Orzammar, we have to go all the way back to -4601 Ancient, when the elves first made contact with the dwarves, who still lived on the surface back then. It is unclear where the dwarves originally came from, but it is said that they lived with the Titans during that time period, though their exact relationship is unknown. Eventually, the elves waged a war against them, killing most of the Titans and driving the dwarves underground. Much later, in -3100 Ancient, the humans arrive in Thedas, and the Dwarven Empire expands, forming kingdoms including Kal Sharok, Hormak and Gundaar. They work with both elves and humans, and eventually in -1200 Ancient, they form an alliance with the Winter, Kal Sharok being conveniently close to the Winter's capital, Minrathous. I guess, sort of. Now, somewhere during that time period, although it is not clear when, the mining caste is founded by a dwarf named Orzammar, one of the 7 brothers that founded the Dwarven Empire. He dug the mines that became the foundations for the Thaig that would be named after him, and would eventually become the Orzammar that we know today. In -1170 Ancient, King Endrin Stonehammer makes Orzammar the capital of the Empire during the unrest following the death of Archon Darinius, and also so that he can focus on trade with the rest of the surface. From this point on, Orzammar begins to expand, and several construction projects enter development, including Stonehammer Hall and the expansion of the Proving Grounds. In -395 Ancient, the First Blight begins, and brings chaos to Thedas. But the dwarves beneath the surface arguably get the worst of it. The unsuspecting dwarves are no match for the monsters emerging from the dark tunnels, and the darkspawn tear through them like a pack of angry Brontos, bringing them to the near brink of extinction. It takes only days for the more remote Thaigs to fall, and the darkspawn use the fallen Thaigs as a foothold to push further into the Dwarven Empire, conquering entire kingdoms in the span of decades. What made things worse for Orzammar is that they were in the middle of a bitter inner-house war. The infighting caused the greatest members of the warrior caste to be either busy battling its petty skirmishes or to be injured from those fights. The political chaos only got worse when the news of the Darkspawn horde reached Orzammar, and every noble demanded that the army be sent to defend their own Thaig, rather than sacrificing their own holdings for the safety of others. All of this allowed the Darkspawn to spread, unchecked, and eventually reach the gates of Orzammar itself. The future of the dwarves looked very grim. That is, until Aeducan of the warrior caste stepped up, and grudgingly took command of the armies. He called upon the smith caste for weapons, and enlisted the aid of the mining caste to collapse overrun passages. Countless of Thaigs were lost, but eventually Aeducan was victorious, and was named a paragon in reward for his heroism. The battle had been won, but the First Blight was far from over. In -255 Ancient, a dwarven smith by the name of Caridin invents what would turn out to be the dwarves' most effective weapon against the Darkspawn, Golems. With the Golems, the dwarves were able to reclaim Thaigs and parts of the deep roads that had been long lost. The creation of a Golem is not without a price, however. Each new Golem requires the soul of a living dwarf, and while many volunteers gave their life willingly, it was not enough. When there were no more volunteers, King Valter became greedy and forced casteless, criminals, and political enemies to become golems. When Caridin refused to continue his work, he too was forced and made into a golem. In -248 Ancient, Caridin vanishes into the deep roads, along with his followers, the anvil, and the secrets of the golem's construction. Many expeditions were sent to search for them, but they were always pushed back by the Darkspawn. After years of debate, an entire force of 126 steel golems was sent into the deep roads to recover the anvil, but none ever returned. Caridin was declared dead, and any hope of a quick victory over the Darkspawn vanished. Archdemon Dumat was officially slain in -203 Ancient, and in the years that followed, the Darkspawn became disorganized without an Archdemon to lead them, and were forced back underground. In -195 Ancient, the Blight was over. For the surface, at least. While the service had claimed victory, the dwarves underground were still battling the Darkspawn every day. Even though they had no archdemon to lead them, they were still great in numbers, and without the help of the Golems, the dwarves were fighting what seemed to be a losing battle. They were forced to seal off parts of the deep roads, and communication between the surviving Thaigs began to falter. In order to protect the city of Orzammar, King Threestone orders the sealing of the deep roads leading to the remaining 3 kingdoms in -40 Ancient. The kingdoms of Hormak and Gundaar fall within the decade. And by -15 Ancient, the last part of the deep roads is sealed off, cutting off the kingdom of Kal Sharok completely. With Kal Sharok now declared lost, Orzammar is believed to be the last of the remaining Dwarven Kingdoms. The sealing of the deep roads helped Orzammar significantly, but the Darkspawn continued their attacks throughout the next centuries, and the kingdom was in a steady decline. Despite that though, the strict traditions of Orzammar's culture as well as its alliance with the Tevinter Imperium persisted. Somewhere between 512 and 524 Exalted during the Fourth Blight, the Darkspawn attacked the city of Marnas Pell, located in the Tevinter Imperium. The dwarves of Orzammar assist Tevinter in successfully lifting the siege, however end up losing Ortan Thaig. By the way, now that we're on the subject of Marnas Pell, and Dwarven lore for that matter, the new Dragon Age comic The Missing will take place in the abandoned deep roads beneath Marnas Pell. And if you didn't know yet, well guess what, we're getting a new Dragon Age comic! It's going to be about Varric and Scout Harding heading into the deep roads in search of a former friend, so here's to hoping we'll get some Dwarven lore. Anyway, I just thought it would be fun to mention in case anyone missed it, and because this is a dwarf related video. But yeah, let's get back to Orzammar now. In 896 Blessed, Endrin Aeducan becomes the new king of Orzammar. 2 years later, the noble house of Tethras is exiled to the surface for denying the voice of the ancestors and willfully manipulating the sacred provings. In 912 Dragon, it is discovered that the kingdom of Kal Sharok did in fact survive. Orzammar demands allegiance from them, but the dwarves of Kal Sharok don't quite agree with that, seeing as it was Orzammar who abandoned them all those years ago. 1 year later, in 913 Dragon, the fortress of Bownammar, a holy place and home of the Legion of the Dead, is lost to the Darkspawn. Another great blow to Orzammar. I'm now going to jump ahead to the events of Dragon Age Origins, so beware of major spoilers. In 930 Dragon, if the Warden is a Dwarven noble, they are the second child of King Endrin of House Aeducan, and Orzammar's newest commander. They have 2 brothers, Trian the eldest and heir to the throne, and Balin the youngest. While Trian is the rightful heir, he is not well liked and many suspect he will not be a good king, including younger brother Balin. Balin will reveal that Trian is plotting to kill the Dwarven noble because they are more likable and well regarded, and therefore may be chosen as a ruler instead. The dwarf noble can choose to believe Balin's warning or not. Regardless, the next day the dwarf noble, along with a small group, is sent into the deep roads to recover an ancient Aeducan shield from the lost Aeducan Thaig. Upon arriving, however, they are met by a group of mercenaries hired to kill the dwarf noble, and it soon becomes clear that Balin's warning about Trian's plans may have indeed been true. After the mercenaries have been dealt with, the dwarf noble runs into Trian and his guards. If the dwarf noble rejected Balin's warning, they will all be dead. If they chose to believe Balin, Trian will accuse them of conspiring against him. No matter what the dwarf noble does after that, a fight breaks out and Trian and his guards end up dead. Balin and the king's party arrive soon after, and whether the dwarf noble actually killed Trian or not, Balin will accuse them of killing Trian in order to become king or queen.
By all the ancestors, what has happened here?
It seems we weren't fast enough. Balin was right.
My daughter, tell me this isn't what it looks like.
Just long enough to slay Trian.
Then we shall discover the truth.
Frandlin Ivo, you are a good and noble man. Did the scout speak the truth?
He did, my lord. It was terrible. Prince Trian didn't stand a chance. Afterward, my lady stripped his signet ring.
You treacherous bastard! Silence, Gorham! Do you have anything else to say, my daughter?
The Assembly will see through you. Everyone knows I was Trian's faithful second.
Bind her. She will be judged before the Assembly. To Orzammar.
After a short time in a cell, they are sent to the deep roads to die. though lucky for them, they run into Duncan, who recruits them into the Grey Wardens. Not too long after these events, King Endrin passes away as a result of grief over losing his two eldest children, causing a political crisis between the two competitors for the throne, Prince Endrin Aeducan and Lord Pyrrell Harrowmont. It is rumored that the king was poisoned by Balin, however that is never confirmed. The city of Orzammar is still in turmoil when the Warden and their allies arrive later in 930 Dragon, seeking aid against the Blight. The dwarves tell the Warden that they can't help while the city is dealing with this political mess, and a new king must be chosen before the troops of Orzammar can come to the surface. The Warden is tasked to go find Paragon Branca, a living paragon whose support would outweigh the dissenting members of the Assembly. Problem is though, Branca had disappeared into the Deep Roads years ago in order to find Paragon Caridin and his Anvil of the Void, which he used in the creation of Golems. So Warden and allies head into the Deep Roads and eventually find both Branca and Caridin. Here the Warden has to choose between destroying the Anvil or preserving it. Branca wants the Anvil so that it can be used once more to make golems and help the dwarves in their everlasting fight against the Darkspawn. Destroying it will anger Branca and result in her attacking the party, but it will also ensure that no other soul will ever be forced into being made a golem again. Caridin wants the Anvil destroyed so that its power to create golems and bind them to controllable rods could never be abused again, as has happened many times in its history. Choosing to preserve it will upset him, and he will turn hostile and attack the party, but earn the favor of Branca. Since they are both paragons, either one can lend the support in choosing a new king of Orzammar. Whichever of them survives forges a crown for the Warden to give to the candidate of their choice, either Prince Balin or Lord Harrowmont. After the new king has been crowned, he assembles the army and prepares to aid the Warden in their fight against the Blight. In 931 Dragon, the Dwarven army marches from Orzammar to Redcliffe Castle, and then on to Denerim to fight the Darkspawn horde. When the Archdemon is slain atop Fort Draken, most of the remaining Darkspawn retreat, and the Fifth Blight ends. If the Warden was a dwarf noble and dies killing the Archdemon, they are declared a paragon and buried next to their father, King Endrin in Orzammar. If Harrowmont was made king, he will also reinstate him back to House Aeducan. If Dwarf Noble survives the final battle and sided with Balin, he will reinstate his older sibling back to House Aeducan. If the Dwarf Noble survived and Harrowmont was made king, they are declared paragon, they get a statue placed in the Commons, and they are reinstated back to House Aeducan and named heir. If the Warden was a dwarf commoner and dies killing the Archdemon, they are made paragon, and their house becomes nobility, drawing so many castelans to it that it becomes the largest house in Orzammar. If the dwarf commoner survives, they are also named paragon, and their house is made nobility, drawing dwarves from every caste. In 932 Dragon, a major noble house of Orzammar leads a dwarven army to the Great Thaigs of Kal Sharok, clearing the deep roads that connected to Orzammar from the Darkspawn, reclaiming it once again. Ferelden still remembering the help and support of Orzammar in the last Blight results in increased trade and stronger diplomatic ties between the two kingdoms. In 940 Dragon, the Mage Templar War and the Orlesian Civil War break out, and the Elder One, aka Corypheus, adds more chaos to that in the following year in 941 Dragon. While Orzammar is not directly affected by this, the city does rely on food imports from the surface, and experiences significant food shortages, leading to riots. Between 941 and 942 Dragon, the Inquisition may gain Orzammar's friendship, and so the king sends legionnaires and financial aid. During that same year, the king of Orzammar also sends the Legion of the Dead to assist Shaper Volta in investigating the earthquakes that disrupt the Lyrian mining operations and cause tunnel seals to break, allowing Darkspawn to pour in. With the help of the Inquisition, they managed to find the source of the earthquakes and resolve the problem. What exactly happened to Volta, however, is unknown. To Orzammar, at least.
The Shapers in Orzammar will want to know what happened to you. Tell them the truth. You don't know. Let's go.
And that's the history of Orzammar so far. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, let me know by liking this video, or leave a comment and let me know if there's a place in Thedas you want me to cover next. That's all for now though. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one.